Chapter 20 is the chapter that will make you free indeed. Chapter 20 of the AL-INJIL, the so-called Millennia chapter, is the orientation chapter. After the rise of Islam, it was placed at the end of the AL-INJIL, made the 20th chapter, as a part of the deception mentioned within. For those who had some understanding of it, realized that the rising of the star of Islam could be the Holy Spirit that Jesus had instructed his disciples to expect after his departure. If there was any doubt, it was removed at the founding of the so-called New World, 1,000 years later after the so-called Dark Ages. As Gog and Magog was spread out all over the world, a world that they had no knowledge of beforehand. The prophecy was clear and easy enough for anyone to understand. So they changed the relative position of the chapter and declared it as prophecy, an event yet to come, when clearly it was history. History that clearly and decisively defines the devil, Satan, and the serpent. It should be noted that in so-called Old Testament times, Gabriel was referred to as the Holy Spirit, and that in old, quote, New Testament, end quote, text, the name Ahmed, a form of Muhammad, was associated with the Holy Spirit. What are the Jews hiding in the secured, secret, so-called, quote, Dead Sea Scrolls, end quote, that they are forbidding the public to see? As you will see, the successful transforming of prophecy to history and history to prophecy is a powerful weapon of deception. It's analogous to making you think the rear view mirror is actually the windshield. You know how that will end. That's in effect what the devils and Satan has done. They have, quote, deceived the entire world, unquote, by transforming the future to the past and the past to the future, history to prophecy and prophecy to history. Quote, he seeks to change the season and the times, end quote. We are at war. Gog, Magog, and Dajjal declared war on the original nation just over 400 years ago. The war is still raging. Many of us have surrendered to the enemy and become collaborators or worse. Listen, just listen carefully, and you will hear the cowards, traitors, and collaborators. They have fallen victim to demons, black-faced Caucasians, the devil's seed. They hate and deny prophecy and the messengers of prophecy called prophets. They hate anyone who disrupts/challenges the illusion that the Dajjal has prepared for them. The blue pill, give me that blue pill. The Hadith reveals that the Dajjal is a master of illusion, such that he will grab and enslave their imagination, thus their minds, even of the saints/NOI, through his proxy, the quote, mouth, unquote, leading them to the destruction of the tribulation, where they will be abandoned. Has anyone noticed that on this prophecy, the prophecy of the chaff/tares/wheats minstrel Farrakhan is silent? Silent on a prophecy of such consequence, of such importance. Silent on the judgment, its central point, the separation of the chaff from the wheat. A prophecy of direct attack by the enemy to corrupt and destroy the original nation. a prophecy mentioned many times in many ways. Why silent? Because he is one of them. He is the quote mouth, end quote. Listen to him. Just listen. The demons, as well as those who have fallen under the Giles spell, mesmerized by the mouth, love this world's life. The enemy's world. The enemy. The Quran promises success to those who love this world's life. You go after that which you love. The demons, the devil's seed, like faithful occasions, would of course love this world. They are of it. For them, there is no portion in the hereafter. That's because they are devils and their natures are incompatible with, contrary to the righteous world of the hereafter. We are at war, being kind to the enemy, wanting to coexist with the enemy, wanting to defend the enemy against their enemies, cohabitating with the enemy, being lured into traps and snares by the distractions of the enemy, sport, play, music, movies, demons, their women, is not the activity of true, brave, loyal soldiers fighting to win, which is the weekly theme, the weekly message delivered by Mr. Ishmael, instructed by Minstrel Farrakhan. No, it is characteristic of traitors, cowards, collaborators who have surrendered and betrayed their nation, their people. For them, there is no portion in the hereafter. Hereafter the war, the destruction of our enemies. Mr. Trump has Iran and North Korea in a stranglehold. He is declaring that he is about to apply a death grip to Iran. He has announced to the world that, quote, sanctions are coming, end quote. Mr. Trump is soon to stop Iran from buying or selling anything, especially the selling of the mainstay of their economy, oil. Iran will have only two choices: to capitulate, bend the knee, or retaliate war. For them, it's a question of submitting to God or the devil. Which do you think they will choose? War will be their answer to the devil's aggression, the devil and Satan's ultimatum. America and Iran are at war. America and North Korea are at war. Mr. Trump was warned not to attack Iran and or North Korea. Mr. Trump has ignored that warning as Eve ignored God's command to leave the tree alone. They are the same story and will end the same way. If you are strangling someone, you are at war with them, even if they are yet to fight back. Their only choice is to be strangled to death or fight back. The war has started. The so-called World War III, War of Armageddon, has started. As chapter 18 of the AL-INJIL reveals, it will begin with universal trade wars that will end in World War III and the fall of Babylon/America. Mr. Trump, Gog, Mrs. May, Magog, and Mr. Netanyahu, Dajjal, is at war with the world, as chapter 13 reveals. Sanctions, sanctions, sanctions. Sanctions are acts of war. Sanctions are war, which means they, with America spearheading, are at war. Mr. Netanyahu, Mr. Trump's puppet master, is string walking Mr. Trump into a regional conflict with Iran. They are already in a hot war with Syria. As the fifth seal reveals, Farad, the Shia's 12th Imam, comforts Iran, telling Iran that he will take revenge on Iran's enemies after Iran's brothers, Shiite Syria, has suffered 8 years of strife/conflicts as they/Iran have previously, which will be 8 years in March. The biblical calendar begins on March the 21st, the first day of spring. 2019 officially starts March 21, which means Farad and his Shia army is about to beat out the money changers/capitalists out of the temple, out of the Middle East. You will awaken one morning in a few days to a new mind-numbing reality. Quote, the shock of the hour, end quote. Those who you thought were firmly fixed, whisked away as a feather in a hurricane. A Middle East exploding ablaze. Those who you rejected, now blocking, now in command of your every door, your every path. Question is, what will be your reality? The 5 virgins that were wise and prepared, who were invited in, or the 5 foolish virgins that were asleep, did not study, who were rejected, cast out? Quote, the shock of the hour is a grievous thing, end quote. The fight for control of the planet, for control of the nations, for control of self. The Dajjal is waging a psychological war against the original nation. Sport, play, music, movies, demons, etc., etc. The Dajjal knows he can't destroy God. He needs to get God to destroy himself. His demons, his hidden enemy women, are playing and plaguing the original nation. The plague has reached the very seat of authority, the NOI. The mouth, quote, he would make war with the saints slash NOI for 42 months slash years and prevail against them, end quote. What do you think that means? The demons know, but they ain't going to tell you. They are in on it. They are there to prevent you from waking up. If awake, to lull you back to sleep. Anyone who has ever read, quote, Message to the Black Man, end quote, Fall of America, end quote, Our Savior has arrived, end quote, and studied or at least read the lessons, know that Mr. Farrakhan is a liar and deceiver. The mouth, quote, it doesn't matter if you warn them or warn them not. They will not believe, end quote. Ishmael lies like a rug every week, nonstop, and no one ever calls him on it. Yet he and all those who are with him will be exposed in a short and quick manner. They think they are safe, far, far from it. There is geological evidence of the presence of an effect of a recently arrived energy wave. The volcanoes, flooding, tornadoes, and earthquake are all of which are a result of an energized planet. What about the geopolitical evidence? Each positive wave increases the pressure between nations, between individuals, as everyone, now increasingly energized, requires more space to exercise their increase in energy. This translates to wanting slash demanding more slash increasing control. As the planet is not increasing in size, more control for some means less control for others. This is conflict. This is pressure. Control is pressure. To control is to exert pressure. Jacob's creation was given control of all the nations. The control reached its zenith in the 19th century under Adam and Eve, Britain and America, aka Magog and Gog. All the nations had been brought under submission. Every nation was under the heel of the Caucasian nations. Quote, the sun never sets on the British Empire, end quote, and by extension, America. The nations began to reassert themselves in the 19th century with the arrival of the first positive energy wave after suffering a 6,000-year period of energy deprivation. The 20th century witnessed an increase in the nation's rejection of Western control. China, Japan, Vietnam in the Far East. Arab resurgence focused on the West's attempts to subdue the Middle East with the insertion of false Israel. The quickening of the original nation, Noble Drew Ali, Marcus Garvey, Farah Muhammad, Elijah Muhammad, the rejection of colonialism in Africa, the expelling of the colonists, the rise and rebellion of governments in South America kicking out the capitalist exploiters. Now we see the nations more aggressive in their rejection of the West's dominance. America and Britain are being challenged all over the planet. Their control is being contested, even being challenged by their brothers and sisters, namely Russia and Europe. However, these challenges are symptomatic of the pressure being exerted on the West. These challenges are fault lines, cracks in Western unity. China is challenging America and by extension the West's control slash access of the China Sea and of Taiwan. South America is challenging America's slash Caucasian control authority, and even their very presence in this hemisphere. Even though what is happening with the so-called immigration situation is not characterized as such in the media or by the politicians, it is exactly the case. They question the Caucasians' very presence in this hemisphere. Iran and Syria are challenging America's and her proxy false Israel's, or the other way around, presence in the region. Saudi Arabia is challenging America's ideological war against Sunnism, just to name a few of those challenging slash contesting the West's control over the planet. America, Britain, false Israel, Gog, Magog, and Dajjal are all being challenged, increasingly challenged. Gog, Magog, and Dajjal are feeling the pressure. Loss, any loss of control, means less power, lower living standards, less security, all of which result in ever-increasing internal pressure. They are reacting by increasing and strengthening their means, their tools of control, their military. The increase in military weaponry are symptomatic of response to pressure. You don't feel a need for weapons until you feel threatened. America's increase in her military is a sign of weakness, not of strength. America is desperately trying to maintain control of the nations, control of the gates of the nations, their waterways. China has threatened and challenged America's influence and access to the China Sea. Russia has challenged America's control and influence over nations that were once within the Russian sphere of influence, the former Soviet Union. North Korea has challenged America's presence and its political and military influence on the Koreas. Iran, as stated earlier, is challenging America's and false Israel's presence and influence in the region. None of the challengers are relenting, are receding, or backing down. All are demanding more control, or the regain of control which was taken by America slash Gog and Britain slash Magog. Gog, Magog, and Dajjal are resolved not to relinquish one square inch. In fact, Gog, Magog, and Dajjal are pushing for greater control, greater influence. Pressure, pressure, pressure. Who will break? Gog, Magog, and Dajjal don't realize their pressure threshold. They were created with an expiration date built into their DNA, meaning that they have a limited pressure threshold which they have reached. The increasing pressure, the push for greater control by all the nations will result in an increase of back-breaking pressure for the West. The increasing pressure is causing fault lines in the West, stress lines which are evidence of crushing pressure, pressure taking its toll, resulting in the crushing of the West. The increased pressure forced Mr. Trump to the center of pressure, the centroid. Pressure forces the strongest to the center. Mr. Trump is the strongest, wisest leader that America is able to produce in her final hours. That's what pressure does. It forces the strongest to surface. Mr. Trump recognizes the problem and is dealing with it directly, which is further evidence of the intense crushing pressure America is under. Pressure that has forced the strongest stone to the surface, but it ain't strong enough. He can't fix it. We have reached the critical point, the point of boiling, the point of unprecedented trouble, the war. The boiling is the war. no place on the planet will escape. Gog/America wants to survive, but there is nothing she can do. The pressure is too great. She was not created to sustain or survive the pressures she is being confronted with. We are post-millennia, the age of deception. We should consider Jesus' admonishment to know a tree by the fruit it bears. What fruit has America borne? Genocide of millions of the so-called Native Americans, the rape of their women and girls, the wholesale murder of their women and children, the theft of their land, the kidnapping of countless millions of blacks from Africa, the relentless and unrestrained rape of black women, girls, and toddlers, including boys, for over 400 years, the torture, murder, oppression of blacks for over 400 years. This was far beyond the definition of slavery. There is no known classification/definition of the crimes they committed against black people, as it was/is unprecedented. Their monstrous acts against blacks have no precedent. They denied and destroyed the humanity of blacks. At least they tried. They honor the perpetrators of their crimes. Jefferson, Washington. That's the fruit that this tree has borne. Do you really think they represent God? Maybe the God of this age, Satan. Ask yourself, has Satan, Baal, Beelzebub, Lucifer, and every known demon had come to America instead of Columbus and company? Is there anything that Satan and his hordes could have done that Columbus and those that followed him didn't? The answer to that question will tell you everything you need to know as to who we are dealing with. The words of the English language have no meaning. The words of a liar has no meaning, no value. They teach you that their words have meaning so that they can deceive you with them. They were brandishing and celebrating the word freedom while in the process of the greatest oppression and tyranny ever committed. They were beating the drums of equality, quote, the self-evident truth of universal equality, end quote, while ferociously reducing millions of kidnapped blacks to animals, socially, religiously, and legally. Singing, quote, home of the brave, land of the free, end quote, brave, while oppressing, whipping, and raping to death defenseless men, boys, girls, women, children, and toddlers. Their words have no meaning. They are just tools to deceive and bind the unaware, the uninformed. They do as they like. They are not bound by words. They bind us with words. The scriptures, when written according to Farad/Elijah, are written every 24,000 years. Every 24,000 years, the scientists write/record the future for the next 24,000 years. At the time of the writing, everything is what is called prophecy. This periodic writing gives the people the ability of foresight. As with vision, if you don't expend the energy to open your eyelids, then you are effectively blind, even though you have the ability to see. The scriptures are there to give you foresight so that you will not walk around mentally blind/impaired. one might notice that foresight, insight, etc. are associated with vision. That is one of the tells of the English language. Most people, 99.9%, don't realize the constraining power of language. Language can enslave you more effectively than iron chains. The reason the English language uses terms related to sight to describe things related to the mind is because sight is the highest sense they are capable of understanding. So they associate all higher senses with sight, such like being blind if you don't understand something or know something which has nothing to do with physical sight. Perception is a better term, but still inadequate. They relate wisdom to experience, which is fault written on its face. If that was true, all elderly would be wiser than the youthful, which is certainly demonstrably wrong. They have no wisdom. They are not capable of wisdom. Wisdom is a function of the spatial mind of which they, the analytical, are devoid of, having that attribute grafted out of them. They vainly try to relate to terms found in Scripture, written by superior intellect to themselves, to their limited experience. If someone 500 years ago read about airplanes, he might think that it's talking about people having wings, which is why they describe angels with wings. As stated, when the scriptures are written, by definition, everything at that point is prophecy, future history. As one moves along the timeline, prophecy is transformed into history. The further one goes, the less prophecy, the more history. More of the prophecy is converted to history. As with a map, you need a compass to determine the correct direction. You need to know your position to know how to get to your destination. If your compass is defective, marked incorrectly, such that north is south, east is west, then you will move steadily in the wrong direction. If you don't know your current position, you will be lost, as such, incapable of finding your destination. A perfect map will be rendered useless without a credible, certified compass. A perfect map is valueless if you can't determine your position. So it is with the scriptures. You must know where you are in time. You must know what is prophecy, what has become history. Short of that, you are blind to reality. You are disorientated and may not even know it. You will continually run into brick walls, stumble over rocks, and fall into pit holes of life because your sense of reality is all wrong, just wrong. When you are ignorant of the prophetic timeline or the timeline has been distorted, you will be confused, lost. You will not know where you are going. You will not know forward from backward. You might be going backward thinking you are going forward. Worse, you will not know who you are and by inference not know an enemy from a friend. You will be out of sync with reality, ignorant of reality. You will be lost and disorientated in a minefield, danger with every step. If you are aware of your condition, then fearful, full of fear, frozen, afraid to move, afraid to go in any direction, vulnerable to anyone who claims to know the way, deceived and lost. That is the state the original nation was in prior to the messenger. In the absence of the messenger, Aaron, as prophesied, has confused the people, making false claims and distorting the timeline. Quote, he would make war on the saints slash NOI and overcome them, end quote. There are three weapons, very effective weapons, that an enemy can use to blind you. One is language, which will have you binding yourself. Language has two powerful bullets. First, the dictionary. They can change the meaning of scripture by changing the meaning of words, such as slavery. Slavery is just a small fraction of blacks' experience in America. Rape, murder, torture, etc. are not defined as conditions of slavery. Using the term slavery is an attempt to minimize the evil. Characterizing our experience as slavery is akin to describing the genocide of the quote Native Americans end quote called Indians as relocation initiative. They use the term slavery to minimize evils that they did and are doing. Many parts of the world, most parts of the world, understand slavery according to the universal historic definition, which is basically a form of servitude. A servant, which in Africa and the Middle East is considered just that, a form of labor, forced or volunteered as just a laborer, a worker, not rape, murder, torture, etc. Second, terms, expressions, or sayings. The Quran alludes to this as it states that Joseph was taught the interpretation of sayings. Idioms are sayings, such like, quote, Jonah was in a well, end quote, which is a Mid-East idiom, like being, quote, cool, end quote, which has only a tangential reference to temperature. In turn, in a well is an idiom for being in distress. How many people actually think Jonah was actually in a whale? If you think that is insignificant, then you are a victim of the language. Thinking in such a manner primes the brain for Santa Claus, Easter Bunny, flying angels, spirits, ghosts, etc. Consider, quote, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, end quote. Profound insight? A popular, acceptable saying which says clearly that God is corrupt, absolutely corrupt. If the enemy can convince you that the past is the future, that the future is past, meaning prophecy is history and history is prophecy, he has effectively blinded you to reality. He has enslaved you more effectively than any iron chain ever could. Anyone who does that or participates in it is an enemy, an enslaver. This act is similar to giving you a defective compass orientated in the opposite direction. North is south, east is west. Similar, but far more effective. One deceived in such a manner will see prophecy in effect, prophecy being unveiled right before their eyes while totally oblivious to it. Like one who is walking around in the brightness of daylight with their eyes closed or blinders on. The light is all about them, but they can't see or benefit from it, even though they have the ability to do so. Then there is identity theft. Even if you can see, even if you have a perfect map, a perfect compass, you still need to know your correct position before you can determine where you are and your destination. If the enemy can convince you that you are something other than what you are, or even convince you that he is you, you are him, he will have you fighting against yourself, your own interests, with you working for him, acting on his behalf. He will become you, your best friend, while you will become him, you becoming your worst enemy. His children will be your children, to nourish, admire, defend, support, while your children are to be rejected, hated, despised. Those who would support you would be perceived as enemies will be perceived as friends. You will act contrary to self. You will become self-destructive. You will love your enemy, hate yourself. Look at how blacks get all indignant and defensive towards anyone who dares to speak ill against Jews or false Israel. The scriptures warn you of this in the story of Esau and Jacob. Jacob / Yaakov's sole agenda was to achieve power and prosperity by stealing his brother's identity. This story is a story of Yaakov. Jacob was a geneticist who played around with the life germ called DNA. He tricked his father-in-law by manipulating the DNA breeding of his father-in-law's herd of sheep to change their physical characteristics in order to rob his father-in-law of them. So even if you can get a perfect map, distinguish between prophecy and history, decipher the language correctly, you will still be your most deadly enemy if you don't know who you are, robbed of your identity inverted, such that your enemy is you and you are your enemy. The aforementioned tricks are the techniques that Yaqub taught his contrary creation to deceive and destroy us. They, the devils and Satan, have used all those techniques to deadly, lethal effect against the original people. The angel reveals these techniques called tricks or tricknology in detail and provides the antidote, the remedy to overcome them. Chapter 20 of the angel is very crucial as it provides the correct orientation for the wise, studious, righteous person to establish his proper place in time, who he is relative to his enemy. The enemy is clearly defined. Once you understand chapter 20, you will no longer be blind, no longer be deceived as to the machinations of the enemy. Once your eyes are open, then the other chapters will give you focus. What good is focus if you are blind? With focus, you will see all the barriers, stumbling blocks, potholes, landmines that the enemy has erected/built just in case you wake up. It is the 20th chapter that the phrase, quote, he deceived the whole world, end quote, is found. How did he do it? He used the techniques stated here with great lethal effect. Here you will find the orientation point in time that which is the truth that will make you free. Quote, know the truth and the truth will make you free, end quote. Free from what? Free from deception, free from blindness. It is the lie of who you are, who the enemy is that has enslaved you, is enslaving you. Most blacks are bound today very much and more so than they were 200 years ago. The chains have morphed from iron to lies, stainless steel, cobalt lies. Lies as to your identity, your enemy's identity, lies as to the times, what's prophecy, what's history. The enemy has in effect tricked you into enslaving yourself and effectively enforcing your own enslavement. Raping, torture, murder, exploitation of self, killing your own children with abortion, buying the shitlings that they used to force you to eat, willingly producing demons, black-faced Caucasians that they used to force upon us through rape. The angel is a sealed book, which requires a specific key to unlock or break its seals. The angel was revealed to the world by Isa 2,000 years ago, stating that there is only one person in the entire universe who is worthy and able to unlock and reveal its revelations. Just one. That would be the Son of Man, Suleiman. There is no ambiguity in that statement. It's at once a challenge to the dragon, false prophets, demons, son of perdition, and anyone else who are pretenders or lamb wannabes. A worthy of challenge as the Quran's challenge to produce a Quranic verse. The idea only the lamb is able to break the seals is the impetus of the legend/myth of King Arthur's sword. Break the seals, reveal the meanings, prove yourself, but they can't, which reduce the revelator to tears. The angel is the credentials of the Son of Man, so that the true believers would not be deceived by liars, thieves, and the main liar, the quote, mouth unquote, the son of perdition, Mr. Anointed. There are 5 nations revealed in the angel. Some say there are 6, the so-called Red Nation, called Native Americans. It's been proven that they are an extension of the so-called Asian Indian nation from which they broke off from 35,000 years ago. Their solution to the future Yakub problem. They thought that they could hide over here for most, if not all of, the 6,000-year reign of Yakub's creation. All the tribes had their own solution to Yakub's coming nightmare. The Arab tribes' idea was to mix in with them. That's why many are so white today. All the tribes disagreed with Dr. Shabazz, who took his tribe from the so-called Middle East into what is now known as Africa to strengthen and prepare his tribe for the epic battle to come. The original nation is symbolized as the seven spirits, seven lampstands, and seven eyes. The original nation is not included as one of the creatures, as the original nation is not a creature. The original nation was not created. It was self-created, the creator of all the other nations, which came from the original nation. The seven eyes of the Lamb are the original nation, with the Lamb being the eighth, the all-seeing eye. Each of the four creatures were full of eyes before and behind. The eagle had 6 wings, as did all the other nations. However, the eagle was dominating the other nations. This is Yaqub's creation, which was given rule for 6,000 years, a rule of mischief and bloodshedding. The two top wings of the eagle are maternal Caucasians, meaning they are original with Caucasian mothers. The top 2 wings of each nation are original, mixed but original. They are Islamic. In the case of the eagle, they are the Shia. The bottom 4 of the eagle's wings represents the paternal Caucasian/devil nations. The 7th, not a wing, is the Lord or God of the eagle, Satan. The bottom 2 wings are Caucasian, mixed but Caucasian. The middle are capitalists, which is a religion. They are jinn/devils. America oppressed and continues to oppress the original nation. Britain occupied the Asian nations. Europe colonized the African nations. Russia dominated the Oriental nations ideologically via communism. The 24 elders were clothed with white robes, which means dominated by the white nations. They had crowns, which are the Shia nations. Each of the 4 dominated nations had 6 wings for a total of 24. The Caucasian nations are grafted nations, so they don't qualify as elders. The nations under the rule of Satan, the Antichrist, cast down the Shia. The UN, which is controlled by false Israel, Gog and Magog, authorizes Gog and Magog to invade Iraq, their gateway into the Middle East, which disrupted the power balance in the Middle East, casting the Shia into the margins. "1,500 years ago, 500 years after Jesus, who presented the angel to the world, Europeans, quote, civilization/world, end quote, Rome began to collapse. It was in a state of decline. The pillars of the European, quote, civilization, end quote, was Rome, which was at that time polarized into 2 factions. Then the restoration of or resurrection of Islam by Muhammad, guided by the angel Gabriel. Muhammad didn't establish Islam, Mecca, the Hajj, or any of it. That already existed. Muhammad was just resurrecting what Abraham had established/built. The rise of Islam broke the back of the European 2 pillars of power, plunging Europe into the so-called Dark Ages or medieval period for 1,000 years. During the 1,000 years Islam ruled, flourished. Prophet Muhammad was a black African. Africa at that time was known to include what is now called Saudi Arabia. The inhabitants were black, original people. Everyone who physically saw the prophet knew he was black with nappy/kinky hair. The reason they prohibit any physical representation of him is because they are hiding the fact that he was black. There was no such restriction during his life or even for many years afterwards. The restrictions came with the infiltration of Caucasians into the Middle East, which resulted in the Caucasianing of the Arabs, whitening/lightening them, and corrupting Islam, the Christifying of Islam. During the 1,000 years of darkness, the Jews and Caucasians were locked up in Europe together. They fought to break the power of their restrainers, the Crusades, but were, for all practical purposes, unsuccessful. Spain, a prized possession of Europe, was controlled by the Moors, black African Muslims, for centuries. The Moors were black Muslims from northwest Africa. After the 1,000 years, the Europeans, discovering that the world was indeed round, was able to break out of the prison they had been confined to by the Muslims. This is signified by the defeat of the Moors, Muslims, blacks from northwest Africa, by the Spanish at Grenada in 1492, the year of Columbus's voyage to discover the so-called New World. They, the Caucasians, went out to encompass it, the world of Columbus, and indeed that is what they did. They went forth to conquer and deceive the whole world. Incidentally, the so-called Inquisition, which was based in Spain, was not to weed out heretics as they say. It was to weed out, snuff out any residue Islamic influence from centuries of Islamic rule of Spain by the Moors, blacks, Muslims from northwest Africa. America, Britain, Europe, Russia, Caucasian nations went out to and did subdue all the nations, naming them, redefining them. Wars, many wars. Now the focus point of the Europeans' of efforts/agenda is the Middle East, inspired by and in support of Israel, false Israel. Drones are roaming the skies, raining fire and destruction continually down on the inhabitants of the Middle East. Let's compare the history of the Europeans to the events outlined in chapter 20. What is the error or deception that Satan is afflicting the nations with? Satan changed reality. How? He modified the prophecy timeline. Prophecy is the documentation of reality, past, present, future, depending on where you are in the time stream. It's similar to convincing someone that east is west and north is south. Once convinced, a perfectly good map is rendered valueless. If you can distort, rearrange the prophetic event timeline in the minds of people, you have effectively distorted their sense of reality. You will have them preparing for spring when they should be preparing for winter. They will think they are in spring when they are in the fall. Quote, man, it's sure cold for spring weather. So they will always be vulnerable, underprepared, and in a perpetual state of shock, as events will always be unanticipated, unexpected. Quote, the shock of the hour. The following is the correct prophetic timeline. The timeline that was understood, acknowledged, and accepted at the time of Jesus and even Muhammad. It would be after the so-called millennia that the prophetic timeline would be altered, as stated in chapter 20, to deceive the nations, to deceive the world. The so-called millennia of chapter 20 is a critical event and orientation event, which puts the scriptures into perspective. Who Satan is, who the devils are, who God and Magog are, puts Islam and Christianity into perspective. Once that event had occurred, the truth was unveiled for all to see, who wished to see. Thus, to those who wished their identity remain hidden, they had to find a way to mask that event, to hide that event. So they rearranged it. They changed its position in the prophetic timeline to make it a yet future event. Being yet future, virtually no one would be looking around, digging around in the past. No one would associate any past history to chapter 20, effectively camouflaging it, hiding it in plain sight. The following is the modified prophetic timeline, the timeline that is universally accepted by the Christian community, which means the Caucasian world and those who are under their domination. This timeline came into being after the so-called Dark Ages, aka medieval period, the true millennia. This is also the period post-millennia when they, Gog and Magog, began the kidnapping, internment, the torture, rape, enslavement, and oppression of the original nation, the beginning of the 400-year bondage of Abraham's seed. So Satan and his devils had to make major modifications in the prophetic timeline. One, to hide the truth of their identity revealed in the Millennia, chapter 20 of the AL-INJIL, and to hide the true identity of Abraham's seed, as stated in chapter 20, as the real followers of Prophet Muhammad, the seed of Abraham. Most don't know that Ishmael is the father of the Arabs, which are North African black people, and that Isaac is the father of the tribes of Shabazz, African black people also, but originating from North Africa, now known as Saudi Arabia. To achieve this, they made two modifications. They made the millennia yet future, and they made the 400-year interment of the seed of Abraham distant past, 4,000 years distant. This false narrative has been accepted by most, if not all, of the Western world. Even Sunni Islam accepts that storyline, at least the distant past interment of Abraham's seed. So Satan has effectively deceived the entire world. Mr. Farrakhan has made his modification to the prophetic timeline to justify himself, even though there is no scriptural support for his assertions that he is other than Aaron/Elias, quote, a mouth, end quote, who succeeded Elijah. Minister Farrakhan has made two significant modifications, one direct and the other indirect, with strong, powerful implications, which are very telling to the awake and vigilant. Farrakhan has shifted the timeline, eliminating the 40 years of Aaron and his treachery, substituting instead the post-Aaron time of Joshua/Jesus/Son of Man. Though the prophecy is crystal clear that Mr. Farrakhan is Aaron, Mr. Farrakhan insists that he is Jesus/Yahshua or Yahshua, who succeeds Aaron. So what happened to the 40-year disposition of Aaron? Mr. Farrakhan just blew it off unchallenged. The second indirect modification is to downplay, undermine, eliminate the promise to Abraham that his seed, after their sojourn, meaning temporary stay in America, would return to their original home. He quotes the prophecy, but omits the verse declaring our return. He doubles down on his deception by declaring that, quote, we ain't going nowhere, end quote. In doing, he implies strongly that the so-called return of false Israel in 1948 was legitimate, kosher. That false Israel satisfied that prophecy, which further infers that we ain't the true seed of Abraham. The non-satanic Jews are. This is powerful stuff, the kind of stuff that the Jews and Christians would consider invaluable, worth billions to have that narrative take root. Farrakhan said it himself. The Jews said they would give him full support, access, and wealth if he taught anything but the teachings of Farad. Sunnism, black nationalism, anything but Faradism. The House of Saud shares those views, those sentiments. The House of Saud, the dragon, hates the NOI of the woman of chapter 12. They eliminated Mr. Farrakhan's money man, Mr. Gaddafi. Now they back the, quote, mouth, end quote, in his war against the woman's seed, the NOI. Mr. Farrakhan has such a low opinion of those FOI that he tells them that he is selling them out and they are clueless. The devil and Satan, Gog, Magog, and the Dajjal are released from their 1,000 years restraint prison to go forth and deceive, terrorize, and dominate the nations for 500 years, from the 1500s to the 2000s, ending in a fiery blaze, a full meal of the evils they have committed. Consequence is a bitch. Prior to 1948, the so-called Jews were persona non grata all over the world. They were hated by everyone universally. Hitler's campaign to destroy them, his final solution, was not condemned by anyone. Stalin may have killed as many or more Jews than Hitler ever did. But suddenly everything changed. They became the salt of the earth. After thousands of years, their shit suddenly became honey and their asses honeypots. What happened? What happened was the event of Elijah, the messenger, who appeared as prophesied and corrected the prophetic timeline. He put everything into perspective, removed the veil from our eyes. At the appearance of Elijah, there was two glaring landmarks: the prophecy of the millennia and the prophecy of the 400-year oppression of the seed of Abraham. Both were no longer prophecy, but it passed from prophecy into history. Two powerful landmarks, eternal glaring monuments to truth. They had to be torn down, blown away, obliterated. As was prophesied, Elijah would restore all things. What things? The prophetic timeline, the identity of Abraham's seed, and the identity of Satan and the devils. America, and particularly the West in general, could not allow that narrative to get a foothold, to get established. They had to counter it. They had to make false Israel Israel. They had to make them kosher. The first act was to give them legitimacy by orchestrating a return, quote, the return of Abraham's seed, end quote. Yes, Elijah happened. The devils, the great haters of the, quote, Christ killers, end quote, saw clearly that they had to destroy Elijah, the messenger's message. They could not allow his narrative, the true narrative, to take hold. Niggers, Abraham's seed? No way. Can't have that. Can't allow that. If they are Abraham's seed, then who are we? What God are we serving? The murderers, rapists, oppressors of Abraham's seed, the apple of God's eye? No, no. So they went about creating a counter narrative. They had to make the Christ killers the beloved of Christ. They had to create clear, ambiguous, undeniable signs that were impervious to any challenge. The first would be the promised return of Israel, just as devils are inclined to. They robbed the Palestinians of their land and set up false Israel. Having accomplished that, America, with Britain in tow, empowers false Israel with unlimited aid, military, financial, economical, to overpower and bully the Palestinians as well as the surrounding Arab nations. This is spelled out in detail in chapter 13. They had to destroy the message and the messenger. Having plotted against and missed the messenger, they went after his spokesman, the, quote, mouth, end quote. They got him. Yes, they got Minstrel Farrakhan, who is about to be exposed. Listen to him. Listen. Is God a man? Absolutely. But man is DNA. DNA is mathematics. So ultimately, God is mathematics. Mathematics is the material in which the first being created himself. Thought is force. Force is pressure. To apply force, you are applying pressure. It requires force to move any and everything. Therefore, since it requires thought to animate your body, thought must be force/pressure. Force is mathematics. Force is the most fundamental manifestation of mathematics. Action-reaction is the most fundamental principle of the universe. Every force is met by an opposite but equal reaction. You reap what you sow. Force equals consequence. The equal sign, the symbol of justice, ensures that what's on one side is met by an equal quantity on the other side. That is what the Quran is trying to tell you, that God is mathematics. The man God is the conscious manifestation of mathematics. Gravity, a non-conscious force, a non-conscious manifestation of mathematics, forces all things into submission. The original man needs no law. He is the law by nature. The original man is mathematics, the very nature of the universe. Mathematics is law. Elijah stated that God is power and force, which is an alternate way to say God is mathematics. Force, again, is the most fundamental principle of mathematics, action/reaction. Power is just a form of pressure, which is force, which is mathematics. Mathematics is all there is. If you insist that God is some kind of spirit, then you must concede that the spirit you call God is capable of thought. Thought is the essence of any being. So the spirit God must be mathematics, since he/it thinks. Through its thoughts, its will is performed. Mathematics is the substance of existence. The universe is not something that can be described or understood mathematically. It is mathematics, period. We, the original people, are the essence of mathematics, the consciousness of mathematics. We are the inner pressure. The heavens are the outer pressure. Pressure responds to pressure. The inner pressure is equal to the outer pressure, which makes us God of the universe, as we are equal to the heavens. The universe is the outer and inner pressure. Quote, the heavens and the earth were one thing, then we expanded the heavens. End quote. Quran. The previous verses makes it crystal clear, abundantly clear, that the righteous are not under the law, nor have any need of law. It should be self-evident that the righteous have no need of law, no more than a bird or lion. Their righteous natures are their embedded law. They are restrained, guided by their righteous natures. If the wild beasts of the field have no need of law, if they are righteous according to their natures, then how are they better than the righteous humans who are of superior intellect? They know exactly what to do without law, without school, without instruction. The original nation was never under any law, no more than birds need law, lions need law, whales need law. They do just fine without any law. Their natures guides them. If raised separate from their parents, they will by nature find their way. Yet if you want a wolf to act like a lamb or a dog to act like a cat, they must be trained, put under law. Their actions govern, actions which are contrary to their nature. So it was/is with Caucasians. Caucasians were made contrary. Having a contrary nature was put under law, law which is the nature of the original people, so that they could be allowed to dwell with and among the original people. The law was made for them, not for us. We are taught that the Masons had to study for 30 years to be allowed to coexist in any way with/among the original people. Their rebellion of the law and domination of the nations forced the original people, the nations, under Yaqub's creation's law, which is contrary to us, oppressive to us. Anything contrary is oppressive. When we act in concert/harmony with our natures, we find ourselves in conflict with them, their laws. Their prisons are bloated/overflowing with original people who were only doing what came natural to them, acting out their nature. We didn't ask to come here. The devils had no right to drag us here, then condemn and oppress us for being here. Any original person interned in one of their prisons is there unjustly, no matter what the charge or act that got them there. The devils have absolutely no right to judge any of us. We didn't ask to be here. They forced our ancestors here, a fact that many weak originals choose to ignore, forget. We should let bygones be bygones, is their cry. Quote, it's in the past, just forget about it, just forgive and forget, end quote. Would you forgive and forget a snake or wolf that bites you? Their souls have been strangled to death by demons, casualties of war. We mourn, bury, then forget them. They are of the dead.